I still have the dress hanging in my closet. Cream-colored silk, with delicate lace sleeves, the kind of elegant, understated piece a mother dreams of wearing to her son's wedding. I'd spent weeks searching for it, wanting something that would make Christopher proud. Something that would say, "I raised you, and look how beautifully you've grown." I never got to wear it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning, when I still believed my son loved me the way I loved him. Before we continue, please subscribe and hit that notification bell, and let us know where in the world you're watching from in the comments. Now, back to my story. My name is Catherine, and I'm 62 years old. For most of my life, I've been what people call a good mother. I raised Christopher on my own after his father, Thomas, died in a construction accident when our son was only 7. Thomas left us with nothing but memories and medical debt. No life insurance, he'd been meaning to get it, he always said. But tomorrow never came for him. So I worked. God, how I worked. 2 jobs most years, sometimes 3 during the holidays. I was a receptionist at a dental office during the day and cleaned office buildings at night. My hands were raw from chemicals, my back ached from bending. But Christopher never went without. He had new shoes every school year. He had birthday parties. He had a college fund that I built quarter by quarter, dollar by dollar. I sacrificed everything. My social life, my health, any chance at love again, though there was one man, Daniel, who wanted to marry me when Christopher was 12. But Christopher had cried, said he wasn't ready for a new father, and I'd chosen my son. I always chose my son. Christopher graduated with honors, got into a good engineering program, started a career that paid him more in a year than I'd made in 5. I was so proud I cried when he signed his first employment contract. All those years of sacrifice had been worth it. My boy had made it. Then he met Vanessa. I should have seen the signs earlier. The first time Christopher brought her to my small 2-bedroom apartment, the same place I'd raised him, the place I'd never been able to afford to leave, Vanessa had looked around with this expression. Not quite disgust, but close. Like she was touring a museum exhibit of poverty. "This is cozy," she'd said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. She was 26, 4 years younger than Christopher, with the kind of polished beauty that came from expensive salons and cosmetic procedures. Her nails were perfect. Her teeth were blindingly white. Everything about her screamed money and privilege. "Mom's lived here since I was a kid," Christopher had said, and I'd heard something in his voice I'd never heard before. Embarrassment. My own son was embarrassed of me. "It's been a wonderful home," I'd said quietly, trying to keep the hurt out of my voice. "We had everything we needed here." Vanessa had smiled, but it hadn't reached her eyes. "Of course. It's very authentic." That was the first crack. They got engaged 6 months later at some exclusive resort in the Bahamas. I found out through a Facebook post, not from my son. In the photos, Vanessa's ring looked like it cost more than everything I owned combined. Christopher looked happy, his arm around her waist, both of them tanned and glowing. I'd sat in my apartment, staring at my phone, waiting for him to call. He didn't. Not that day. Not the next. Finally, 3 days after the announcement, he sent a text. "Sorry, been crazy busy. We're engaged. We'll call soon." He didn't call. I called him. "Christopher, honey, congratulations," I'd said, forcing brightness into my voice. "I'm so happy for you. Tell me everything." "Thanks, Mom." He'd sounded distracted. "Look, I can't really talk right now. We're meeting with Vanessa's parents about the wedding planning. It's going to be huge. Her dad's invited like 300 people from his company alone." "Oh, that's wonderful." I'd paused. "When would you like to get together?" "I'd love to take you both to dinner to celebrate." "Yeah, we'll figure something out. Listen, I gotta go. Love you." The line went dead. I'd stared at my phone for a long time after that, a cold feeling settling in my stomach. This wasn't my Christopher. My boy would have been excited to share this with me. My boy would have wanted me there. But my boy was gone, replaced by this stranger who lived in Vanessa's world now. The wedding planning started without me. I learned about venues, color schemes, and guest lists through Christopher's occasional, obligatory phone calls. Each conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. Each one felt like a duty he was checking off a list. Call Mom. Done. Vanessa's mother, Gina, became the central figure in the planning. I'd met her twice, both times at expensive restaurants where I'd felt completely out of place among the crystal and white tablecloths. Gina was 58 but looked 40, with work done so expertly you could barely tell. She'd looked at me the way people look at stray dogs, with pity mixed with vague discomfort. "Catherine," she'd said during our second meeting, her voice honey-sweet. "Christopher mentioned you've been working so hard your whole life. You must be exhausted." "I'm proud of the work I've done," I'd replied carefully. It gave Christopher every opportunity. Of course, Gina had smiled. "Well, you won't need to worry about anything for the wedding. I've hired the best planner in the city. Everything will be taken care of." Translation: "We don't need your input. We don't want your input." I'd smiled and nodded, swallowing the hurt. 3 months before the wedding, I'd finally been invited to a family meeting at Vanessa's parents' house. Their home was a mansion in the suburbs, 6 bedrooms, a pool, a 3-car garage. I'd driven my 15-year-old Honda Civic up their circular driveway, feeling smaller with each passing moment. Inside, the wedding planner had spread photographs and fabric samples across a dining table that could seat 12. Everything was white and gold, roses and peonies, crystal and champagne. "Catherine." Vanessa had air-kissed me on both cheeks, a gesture so foreign it made me flinch. "We're so glad you could make it. We wanted to show you everything." She didn't want to show me. She wanted to display her perfect wedding to make sure I understood how far above me she'd risen, how completely she'd claimed my son. For 2 hours, I sat and listened to discussions about imported flowers and designer dresses, about destination bachelor parties and rehearsal dinners at country clubs. No one asked my opinion. No one asked if I wanted to contribute anything, not that I could have afforded any of it. Finally, Gina had turned to me with that same pitying smile. "Catherine, we've been thinking about the processional. Traditionally, the mothers are seated early, before the bridal party. We'll have a lovely seat reserved for you in the 3rd row. The 3rd row, not the front row where mothers sit. The 3rd row, like I was a distant relative. A courtesy invite." "The 3rd row?" I'd repeated, my voice barely audible. "Well, yes." Gina had glanced at Vanessa. "The front row on the groom's side will be for Christopher's father's family, his aunts and uncles. And we need room for some of Daddy's business partners. You understand?" Thomas had been an only child. He had no siblings, no aunts or uncles. She was lying, and she wasn't even trying to hide it well. I'd looked at Christopher, waiting for him to say something, to defend me, to tell them that his mother belonged in the front row at his wedding. He'd looked away. "That's fine," I'd heard myself say. "Whatever you think is best." Vanessa had smiled. "We knew you'd understand. You're always so accommodating." The dress incident came 6 weeks before the wedding. I'd finally found the perfect dress, that cream-colored silk I mentioned. It was elegant but not flashy, expensive by my standards but still within what I'd saved. The saleswoman had said I looked beautiful in it, and for the first time in months, I'd felt a flicker of joy about this wedding. I'd wanted to share it with Christopher, to have one moment that felt like it used to between us. So I'd texted him a photo of me in the dressing room, smiling, hopeful. His response came 30 minutes later. "Mom, we need to talk. Can you come over tonight?" The tone made my stomach drop. I'd driven to the apartment he shared with Vanessa, a modern high-rise downtown that cost more per month than I made in 3. When I arrived, Vanessa answered the door, her expression cold. "Catherine, come in." Christopher was sitting on their white leather sofa, looking uncomfortable. Vanessa sat beside him, her hand possessively on his knee. "So," Vanessa had started before I'd even fully sat down, "we saw the dress you picked out. Do you like it?" I thought, "It's white." She'd interrupted. I'd blinked. "It's cream. Ivory, really. The traditional color for mothers of the groom. It photographs as white." Vanessa's voice had turned ice cold. "And there's only one person who should be wearing white at my wedding. Vanessa. I would never, wouldn't you?" She'd leaned forward. "I've seen how you've been trying to insert yourself into everything, always calling Christopher, always wanting updates. always making everything about you. My mouth had fallen open. I've barely heard from Christopher in months. I've stayed out of everything. Because we've been trying to plan a wedding, Vanessa had snapped. Do you know how stressful this is? And now you're trying to wear white to upstage me on my own wedding day. That's not Christopher, please. I'd turned to my son, desperate for him to see reason. To remember who I was, what I'd done for him. Christopher had looked at me with this expression I'd never seen before. Distant, cold, like I was a problem to be solved. Mom, he'd said quietly, just don't wear white, okay? Pick something else, something darker. Navy, maybe? Or, I don't know, just not white. Christopher, this dress is cream. It's traditional. Your father's mother wore cream to our wedding. Dad's dead, Christopher had said flatly. And this isn't about him. This is Vanessa's day. Our day. Can you please, just once, not make everything about you? The words had hit me like a physical blow. Not make everything about me? I'd worked myself to the bone for him. I'd given up everything for him. And now I was the selfish one? I've never made anything about me, I'd whispered. Everything I've done has been for you. Yeah, and you've never let me forget it. Christopher had stood up, angry now. Every conversation, it's about how hard you worked, how much you sacrificed. I get it, Mom. You had it tough, but I'm not your retirement plan, okay? I'm not responsible for making you feel like your life had meaning. The room had gone silent. Vanessa had looked almost pleased. I'd stood on shaking legs. I'll wear whatever you want, I'd said, my voice hollow. I wouldn't dream of ruining your special day. Thank you, Vanessa had said sweetly. And Catherine? The wedding color scheme is white and gold, so maybe avoid those colors entirely. We wouldn't want any confusion. I'd left without another word. I'd returned that beautiful cream dress the next day. In its place, I bought a simple charcoal gray dress. It was shapeless and unflattering, the kind of thing you'd wear to a funeral, but it was definitely not white, not cream, not anything that could possibly offend. I hung it in my closet and tried not to look at it. The rehearsal dinner was held at an exclusive country club 2 days before the wedding. I'd been told attendance was optional for extended family, which was Vanessa's way of saying I wasn't really wanted. But Christopher had actually called and asked me to come. Please, Mom. I know things have been tense, but you're still my mother. I want you there. It was the first time in months he'd sounded like my son, and I'd clung to that. Maybe things could still be repaired. Maybe this was just wedding stress, and after everything was over, I'd have my Christopher back. I'd arrived at the country club in my best outfit, a navy pantsuit I'd bought from a discount store. Everyone else was in cocktail dresses and designer suits. I'd stood in the marble foyer, clutching my purse, feeling like an imposter. Catherine, Gina had swept over, already 3 glasses of wine in. You made it. Here, let me show you to your table. She'd led me to a table in the back corner. Not with the immediate family, not with the wedding party. With random co-workers of Christopher's I'd never met and a few distant cousins from Vanessa's side. You'll be comfortable here, Gina had said, already turning away. I'd sat through dinner in silence while toast after toast was made at the head table. Vanessa's father spoke about his brilliant, beautiful daughter. Vanessa's maid of honor told hilarious stories about their college days. Christopher's best friend talked about how Christopher had finally found his other half. No one mentioned me. No one mentioned the woman who'd raised him alone, who'd worked 3 jobs to give him opportunities, who'd been both mother and father for 15 years. I was invisible. Halfway through dinner, I'd excused myself to the bathroom, needing a moment to breathe, to compose myself, to remember that I was strong enough to get through this. In the hallway, I'd heard voices, Christopher and Vanessa, arguing in one of the side rooms. Don't understand why she even needs to come to the wedding, Vanessa was saying. She makes everything awkward. She's my mother, Vanessa. She's embarrassing. Did you see that suit? She looks like she's going to a job interview at Walmart. And at the ceremony, everyone's going to know she doesn't belong. My father's friends are going to see her in that horrible gray dress and wonder what kind of family you come from. What do you want me to do? Uninvite her? Silence. Then, would that be the worst thing? More silence. Christopher, think about it, Vanessa continued, her voice soft now, persuasive. This is supposed to be the most perfect day of our lives. Every photo, every moment should be exactly right. She's going to stick out. She's going to ruin the aesthetic. And honestly, baby, don't you think you've paid your dues? You've been the dutiful son. You've been patient with her guilt trips and her constant reminders of how much she sacrificed. When do you get to just move on? I'd pressed myself against the wall, my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. I don't know, Christopher had said finally, and he'd sounded tired. Maybe you're right. Maybe it would be easier if what? If she just couldn't make it. If something came up. Vanessa had laughed, a bright, crystalline sound. See? You do understand. Listen, what if we just reduce her visibility? We already moved her to the 3rd row. We could seat her even further back. Maybe behind a column? And we'll make sure the photographer knows to keep her out of the important shots. Yeah. Okay. That works. I'd fled before I could hear more, my heels clicking against the marble as I rushed toward the exit. I'd made it to my car before the sobs came, harsh and breathless. My son wanted to erase me, the boy I'd raised, the child I'd loved more than my own life, wanted me hidden away like a shameful secret. I'd driven home and cried until I had no tears left. The morning of the wedding, I'd woken up with a strange calm. I'd spent the night before making a decision, one I'd been avoiding for months. I wasn't going. I couldn't watch my son marry a woman who despised me. I couldn't sit in the back row, hidden behind a column, pretending everything was fine. I couldn't smile for photos I wouldn't be in and celebrate a union that had destroyed my relationship with my only child. I'd called Christopher at 9 a.m. The wedding was at 4. Mom? What's wrong? Christopher, I'm not feeling well. I don't think I can make it to the wedding today. Silence. Then, are you serious right now? I'm sorry, honey. I think it's food poisoning. Or maybe the flu. I've been up all night. This is because of the dress, isn't it? His voice turned hard. Because we asked you not to wear white? Are you really that petty? No, Christopher. I'm genuinely... Save it, Mom. You know what? Fine. Don't come. Vanessa was right about you. You can't stand to see me happy. You can't stand that I've built a life that doesn't revolve around you. That's not true, isn't it? My entire life? You've held your sacrifices over my head like a weapon. I worked so hard for you. I gave up everything for you. Well, guess what? I didn't ask you to. I didn't ask to be born, and I didn't ask you to make yourself miserable raising me. The words shattered something inside me. I never wanted you to be miserable, I'd whispered. I wanted you to have a good life. Well, I have one now, and apparently it's better without you in it. The line went dead. I'd sat there holding my phone, feeling like I'd been hollowed out. Everything I'd feared, everything I'd tried to prevent, had come true. I'd lost my son, not to death like his father, to something worse, to choice. I'd spent the rest of that day in a fog. I'd turned off my phone. I'd closed the blinds. I'd sat in the dark living room where I'd raised Christopher, surrounded by photos of him at every age gap, toothed at 6, proud in his high school graduation gown, beaming at his college graduation. In every photo, I was beside him, supporting him, loving him. Those photos were lies now. That boy was gone. Night fell. The wedding would be over by now. They'd be at the reception, dancing, celebrating. Christopher would have his first dance with Vanessa, and there would be toasts and laughter and joy. And I would be here, alone. Around 10 p.m., my phone buzzed. I'd turned it back on, some desperate part of me hoping Christopher might call, might apologize, might tell me he'd made a terrible mistake. It wasn't Christopher. It was a number I didn't recognize, a local area code. Hello? Is this Catherine Morrison? Yes? Ma'am, this is Officer Dennis Chen with the State Police. I'm calling about your son, Christopher Morrison. The world tilted. What's happened? Is he okay? Ma'am, there's been an accident. We need you to come to County Memorial Hospital as soon as possible. I don't remember the drive to the hospital. I remember being in my living room, and then I was in the emergency room waiting area, and everything in between was blank. A doctor found me there. her expression grave. Mrs. Morrison? I'm his mother. What happened? Where is he? Please sit down. I don't want to sit down. I want to see my son. The doctor had guided me to a chair anyway, her hand gentle on my arm. There was an accident. Your son and his wife, they just got married today? I'd interrupted, my voice strange and high. Just a few hours ago, they were at their reception. Yes, they left the reception around 9:30. According to witnesses, they were speeding. She'd paused. They ran a red light at an intersection. There was a collision with another vehicle. The room spun. Are they okay? Can I see them? The doctor's face had told me everything before she spoke. I'm so sorry. They didn't survive the impact. They were both pronounced dead at the scene. The next hours were a blur of officials and paperwork and questions I couldn't answer. How fast were they going? I don't know. Had they been drinking? I don't know. Who was driving? I don't know. I knew nothing. I hadn't been there. I'd been home, alone, grieving the loss of my son while he was still alive. And now he was gone. A different officer pulled me aside around midnight. Mrs. Morrison, I need to ask you some questions about the accident. I'd nodded numbly. Were you aware your son and his wife had been drinking at the reception? I wasn't there. The officer's eyebrows raised. You weren't at your son's wedding. We'd had a disagreement. I wasn't feeling well. He'd written something down. According to witnesses at the venue, your son and his new wife had been drinking champagne throughout the evening. Multiple witnesses reported that Christopher seemed upset about something, and Vanessa was heard saying they needed to blow off steam. They left the reception early and got into Christopher's car, a BMW M4, registered in his name. Christopher doesn't drink and drive, I'd said automatically. He's always been so careful. Mrs. Morrison, the preliminary toxicology reports show your son's blood alcohol content was 12. That's over the legal limit. The words hadn't made sense. Christopher had been drunk? Christopher, who'd lectured me about wearing the right seatbelt, who'd taken a defensive driving course in high school. There's more, the officer had continued. Surveillance cameras at the intersection caught the accident. They were going 70 in a 35-mile-per-hour zone. They ran a red light without even slowing down. The other driver, a 48-year-old nurse coming home from her shift, is in critical condition. I'd started shaking. That's not. Christopher wouldn't. But he had. My careful, responsible son had gotten drunk at his wedding, climbed behind the wheel, and killed himself and his new wife, and nearly killed an innocent woman. Were there problems between you and your son? The officer had asked. Anyone who attended the wedding mentioned that you'd been expected but didn't show. We'd argued, I'd whispered. He told me not to come. The officer had studied me for a long moment. I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Morrison. We'll be in touch if we have more questions. I'd sat in that hospital waiting room until dawn, unable to make myself leave. As long as I was there, it wasn't real. As long as I didn't go home to that empty apartment, Christopher was still alive somewhere. But eventually, a nurse had gently told me I needed to go. There was nothing more I could do there. I'd driven home as the sun rose, the city waking up around me, people going to Sunday brunch, families in their church clothes, the world continuing like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. My son was dead, and our last words to each other had been filled with anger and hurt. The police called again that afternoon. The other driver, the nurse, had stabilized. She would live, though she'd need months of physical therapy. Her family was considering a lawsuit against Christopher's estate. Estate? I'd repeated. Yes, ma'am. Your son's assets. Since his wife also passed, and they had no children. As his next of kin, you would be the executor of his will. I hadn't thought about that. Hadn't thought about anything beyond the immediate shock. I don't know if he had a will. We found one in the documents we collected from his apartment. You're listed as the executor, though. The officer had paused. You might want to contact an attorney, Mrs. Morrison. This could get complicated. Christopher's lawyer called 2 days later. His name was Mark Sullivan, and he'd handled Christopher's financial planning. Mrs. Morrison, I'm deeply sorry for your loss. I wanted to reach out to discuss Christopher's will and estate before things become more public. What do you mean? Christopher and Vanessa had their wills updated just last week. Given the circumstances, this is going to be a complicated probate. He'd arranged to meet me at his office that afternoon. I'd driven there in a daze, still wearing the same clothes I'd worn to the hospital. I hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, hadn't processed anything. Mark Sullivan's office was all dark wood and leather chairs. He was 50-ish, sympathetic, professional. Mrs. Morrison, let me be direct. Christopher's will leaves everything to his wife, Vanessa. However, since Vanessa passed simultaneously, her will takes effect. And Vanessa's will leaves everything to her parents, Gina and Gregory. I'd blinked at him. What does that mean? It means that all of Christopher's assets, his savings, his investments, his retirement accounts, even his share of the apartment he owned with Vanessa, all of it goes to Vanessa's parents. But I'm his mother. Yes, but you're not named in the will. Mark had pulled out a document. In fact, there's a specific clause here. Would you like me to read it? I'd nodded, unable to speak. He'd cleared his throat. In the event of my death, I specifically exclude my mother, Catherine Morrison, from any inheritance or claim to my estate. She has been adequately provided for through the years I've supported her, and I owe her no further obligation. The words hung in the air. Supported her? He'd bought me dinner 3 times in the past 5 years. He'd given me a $200 Amazon gift card last Christmas. This can't be legal, I'd whispered. It's completely legal. People have the right to distribute their assets as they see fit. Mark had looked uncomfortable. There's more. Christopher had a life insurance policy, $500,000. The beneficiary was recently changed from you to Vanessa. Since Vanessa is deceased, it goes to her estate, which means her parents. I'd stared at him. I was the beneficiary? Up until 2 months ago, yes. 2 months ago. Right when I'd sent that photo of the cream dress. Mrs. Morrison, I have to tell you something off the record. Mark had leaned forward. I advised Christopher against these changes. I told him he was being rash, that he might regret it. But he was insistent, he said. Mark had hesitated. He said he was tired of feeling guilty, that you'd made your choices, and he'd made his, that he wanted to start his new life with Vanessa without the weight of obligation. Obligation, that's what I'd been to him. Not his mother, not the woman who'd raised him alone. An obligation. The wake was held at the same funeral home where we'd held Thomas's service 30 years earlier. I'd walked into the viewing room to find it already full of people I didn't know. Vanessa's friends, Christopher's co-workers, people in expensive suits and designer dresses, all murmuring sympathetically. Gina and Gregory stood near the caskets, yes, both of them, side by side, white and gold even in death, accepting condolences like they were the primary mourners. I'd approached slowly, still in shock. I'd chosen to wear the charcoal gray dress I'd bought for the wedding. It seemed fitting somehow. The dress I'd been told to wear to his wedding was now appropriate for his funeral. Gina had seen me coming and her expression had shifted, not to sympathy, to something colder. Catherine. She'd air-kissed me, the same false gesture Vanessa used to do. We weren't sure you'd come. He's my son. Of course. Gina had glanced at her husband, some silent communication passing between them. We need to discuss the arrangements. Gregory and I have decided to have the funeral at St. Michael's Cathedral. It's where Vanessa was baptized. We've planned a reception afterward at the country club. I'd like to be involved in the planning, I'd said. Christopher was my son. Christopher was going to be part of our family. Gina had interrupted. And Vanessa was our daughter. We feel it's appropriate that we handle the arrangements. I'm sure you understand. I didn't understand. But I'd nodded anyway, too tired to fight. Oh, and Catherine. Gina's voice had dropped, become almost gentle. We know this must be difficult for you, financially. Gregory and I would like to offer you $10,000 from Christopher's life insurance. To help with your expenses. We think that's fair, given everything. $10,000. Out of $500,000. They were buying me off, making sure I didn't contest the will. That's generous, I'd heard myself say, the words bitter in my mouth. We thought so. Gina had smiled. We'll have the check ready for you after the funeral. The funeral was 3 days later. St. Michael's Cathedral was enormous, all soaring ceilings and stained glass. The pews were packed with people who'd loved Vanessa, who'd worked with Christopher, who'd known them as a couple. I sat in the 4th row, not the 3rd, like I'd been assigned at the wedding. The 4th, because the front 3 rows were reserved for immediate family, which apparently meant Vanessa's parents, her siblings, her grandparents, her cousins. I was Christopher's mother, and I sat in the 4th row. The service was beautiful in an impersonal way. The priest talked about young love cut short, about bright futures stolen, about tragedy and loss. He mentioned Vanessa's charity work. I hadn't known she did charity work. And Christopher's professional achievements. I'd known about those. I'd celebrated every promotion from afar. He didn't mention me. No one asked me to speak. No one acknowledged me. I was invisible, just like I'd been at the rehearsal dinner. Gina gave a eulogy about Vanessa. Gregory talked about Christopher as the son we never had. Vanessa's sister sobbed about losing her best friend. I sat in the 4th row in my funeral dress, the dress that was supposed to be for a wedding, and I didn't cry. I couldn't. The grief was too big, too overwhelming. It had gone beyond tears into something cold and hollow. During the final hymn, as everyone stood, I'd looked at those 2 caskets at the front of the cathedral, white and gold, just like Vanessa had planned for the wedding, coordinated even in death, and I'd thought about the dress hanging in my closet at home, the cream-colored silk with lace sleeves, the dress I'd been so excited about, the dress Christopher had rejected. "Don't wear white," he'd said, "or you'll ruin everything." I'd obeyed. I'd bought the gray dress. I'd worn it to his funeral instead of his wedding. But looking at those caskets, at Gina dabbing her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief, at Gregory's arm around his wife, I'd realized something. I'd ruined everything anyway. The burial was private. Immediate family only, Gina had said, which of course meant I wasn't invited. I'd stood at a distance, under a tree at the cemetery, watching as they lowered both caskets into the ground. Christopher was buried next to Vanessa, in the Whitmore family plot. Even in death, he wasn't mine anymore. I'd waited until everyone left before approaching the graves. The flowers were already wilting in the afternoon sun, hundreds of white roses, exactly like Vanessa had wanted for her wedding bouquet. "I'm sorry," I'd whispered to the fresh earth. "I'm sorry I wasn't enough. I'm sorry I couldn't give you the kind of life that made you proud. I'm sorry our last words were angry." The wind had rustled through the trees. Christopher didn't answer. He never would again. The legal complications began a week later. The nurse Christopher and Vanessa had hit her name was Maria Rodriguez had indeed filed a lawsuit. Her medical bills were over $200,000, and she'd suffered a traumatic brain injury that would affect her for the rest of her life. Her lawyer contacted me, thinking I was the executor of Christopher's estate. "Mrs. Morrison, we understand this is a difficult time, but your son was responsible for injuries that have permanently disabled our client. We're seeking damages to cover her medical expenses, lost wages, and pain and suffering." I don't have access to Christopher's estate," I'd explained. "Everything went to his wife's parents." "That's not how this works," the lawyer had said. "The estate is liable, regardless of who inherits. We'll be filing claims against the estate itself." I'd referred them to Mark Sullivan, Christopher's lawyer. Let the Whitmores deal with it. Let them face the consequences of their daughter and my son's recklessness. But it didn't end there. 2 weeks after the funeral, Mark called me again. "Catherine, we need to talk. There's been a development." We met at his office again. This time, he had a stack of documents in front of him. "The probate investigation has uncovered some issues," he began. "Standard procedure when there's significant assets and a lawsuit involved. The court ordered a full review of Christopher's finances, and Christopher was broke." I'd stared at him. "That's impossible. He made over $150,000 a year. He had investments, savings. He had debts." Mark had opened a file. Credit card debt, personal loans. He owed $80,000 on that BMW. The apartment he shared with Vanessa was mortgaged to the hilt. They'd taken out a second loan against it 6 months ago. For what? The wedding. Mark had looked up. Catherine! They spent $400,000 on that wedding. The venue alone was $50,000. Vanessa's dress was $25,000. The flowers, the food, the band, the photographer. It was all top tier. They'd been planning it for a year, and they financed most of it. I'd felt dizzy. $400,000? For one day? Vanessa came from money, but Gregory Whitmore isn't as wealthy as he appears. His business has been struggling. He couldn't afford to pay for the wedding himself, so Christopher took out loans. Multiple loans. He'd planned to pay them back over time, but Mark had gestured helplessly. Now those debts are part of his estate. What about the life insurance? The $500,000? Half of it will go to paying off the wedding debts and the car loan. Another significant portion will go to Maria Rodriguez's settlement. Her lawyer is very good, and frankly, Christopher was clearly at fault. By the time everything is settled, there might be $75,000 left. $75,000. Out of $500,000. And that goes to the Whitmores, I'd said flatly. Actually. Mark had pulled out another document. Here's where it gets interesting. The Whitmores are contesting some of Christopher's debts. They claim he was coerced into overspending on the wedding, that Vanessa didn't understand the financial implications. They're trying to get the estate to claim that Vanessa's influence was a form of undue influence, which would invalidate some of the debt. That's insane. It gets better. They've also filed a claim stating that you should be responsible for part of Christopher's debts because you failed to provide adequate financial guidance during his upbringing. I'd laughed. Actually laughed. A harsh, bitter sound. I'm being sued for not teaching him better financial skills? While working 3 jobs to keep him fed? It won't hold up in court. It's a Hail Mary attempt to redirect some of the liability, but it shows you the kind of people you're dealing with. I'd already known what kind of people I was dealing with, but having it confirmed still hurt. A month after the funeral, I received a letter from Gina Whitmore. Catherine, we've been forced to reevaluate the financial situation following the tragic loss of our daughter and Christopher. Given the extensive debts and legal complications, we will not be able to provide you with the $10,000 we originally discussed. We hope you understand. We also ask that you refrain from any further contact with our family. This has been an incredibly difficult time, and we feel it's best if we all move forward separately. Sincerely, Gina and Gregory Whitmore. I'd read it twice, then set it on fire in my kitchen sink and watched it burn. Spring came, and then summer. I kept working at the dental office. I kept cleaning office buildings at night. My life continued exactly as it had before, except now there was a hole where my son used to be. I'd packed up the photos of Christopher, unable to look at them without feeling that hollow ache. The apartment felt too big and too small at the same time. I was sorting through his childhood things one evening, things he'd never come to collect, things I'd saved for grandchildren who would never exist when I found it. A letter, tucked in the bottom of a box of his high school yearbooks. The paper was new, the ink fresh. It was dated 3 weeks before his death. Mom, I don't know if I'll ever give this to you. Vanessa would kill me if she knew I was writing it. But I can't get married without saying this first. I'm sorry. I've been terrible to you these past few years. I let Vanessa and her family convince me that you were an embarrassment, that your sacrifices were manipulations, that I owed you nothing. I let them put you in the 3rd row at my wedding. I told you not to wear white. I said horrible things to you on the phone, and all of it was wrong. You weren't perfect. You worked too much, and sometimes I felt alone even when you were there. But you loved me. You loved me so much that you gave up everything else. Your health. Your chance at love with Daniel. Yeah, I remember him. And I remember crying because I was scared, and you let him go because of me. Your entire life became about making sure I had opportunities. And I threw that back in your face because I was ashamed. Vanessa's world is different from ours. Her family has money and connections and this effortless confidence that comes from never having to worry. I wanted to be part of that world so badly that I was willing to pretend I didn't come from you, from our tiny apartment and discount groceries and secondhand clothes. But I did come from there. And you know what? I shouldn't be ashamed of that. I should be proud, because you made something from nothing. You turned love and determination and backbreaking work into a son who got to go to college, who got to have a career, who got to have choices. I just wish I'd chosen better. The wedding is next month. I know you probably won't come after everything I said. I don't blame you, but I want you to know whether I have the courage to tell you in person or not that I love you, that I'm grateful, that you deserved a better son than me. I'm going to try to do better. After the wedding, when things calm down, I'm going to come see you. We're going to have dinner, just us, and I'm going to tell you all of this to your face. I'm going to apologize properly. I'm going to make things right. I love you, Mom. Christopher. The letter shook in my hands as I read it again, and again, and again. He'd been planning to apologize. He'd known he was wrong. He'd been coming back to me, but he'd never gotten the chance. I'd sat on my living room floor, surrounded by yearbooks and old trophies and childhood drawings, and I'd finally cried. Not the hollow, empty grief I'd been carrying. Real tears, hot and painful and cleansing. My son had loved me. In the end, he'd remembered who I was, who we were. It hadn't been enough to save him, but it was enough to let me start healing. 6 months after the funeral, the estate was finally settled. Maria Rodriguez received $150,000 in settlement. The wedding debts were paid. The car was sold. The apartment was liquidated. The Whitmores received $47,000. Split between them and their lawyers, it probably barely covered their expenses for the whole ordeal. I received nothing from the estate, but I received something else. Mark Sullivan called me one final time. "Catherine, I wanted you to know the life insurance company found an error. Christopher had a second policy, a small one through his employer, $50,000. It's a standard benefit that gets automatically issued, and he never changed the beneficiary. It's still in your name, $50,000. Not the fortune the Whitmores had received, but more money than I'd seen in my entire life. What should I do with it?" I'd asked. "Whatever you want. It's yours, free and clear." I'd thought about it for a long time, about Christopher's sacrifices to fit into Vanessa's world, about my sacrifices to give him opportunities, about all the ways love can twist into obligation and resentment. In the end, I'd split the money 3 ways. $15,000 went to Maria Rodriguez, additional support beyond the settlement. She'd done nothing wrong, and she'd suffered. $15,000 went into a scholarship fund at Christopher's high school for students whose parents were working multiple jobs to give them opportunities. Students like Christopher had been, and $20,000 I kept. I paid off my car. I paid off my credit cards. I set aside enough for my own funeral, so no one would ever have to bear that burden for me. The rest I saved. For what? I didn't know yet. Maybe a trip I'd never taken. Maybe a home with more than 2 bedrooms. Maybe just the peace of mind of having something put away. A year after the funeral, I was cleaning the dental office late one night when my phone rang. Unknown number. "Is this Catherine Morrison?" "Yes." "Mrs. Morrison, my name is Jennifer Chen. I'm Officer Dennis Chen's sister. You spoke with my brother the night your son passed." "I remember. I hope this isn't inappropriate, but Dennis mentioned you'd been very kind to him during what I know was an impossible night, and I lost my daughter 5 years ago. Car accident, similar circumstances. I know what that grief is like." I'd sat down in the chair I'd just been cleaning. "I'm sorry for your loss, and I'm sorry for yours. I wanted to reach out because there's a support group I attend, parents who've lost children. It's helped me, and I thought, maybe it might help you too, if you're interested." I'd taken down the information, thought about it for a week, almost didn't go, but I did. The group met in a church basement, 15 people, all different ages, all carrying the same hollow look I saw in the mirror every morning. We went around the circle, introducing ourselves and our losses. When it was my turn, I'd said, "My name is Catherine. My son Christopher died a year ago in a car accident on his wedding day. Our last conversation was an argument. I didn't go to his wedding. I wore gray to his funeral because he'd told me not to wear white to his wedding, and it felt like even in death, I was still obeying him, still trying to please him. A woman across the circle, maybe 60, had reached out and squeezed my hand. My daughter cut me out of her life 3 years before she died, the woman said. We never reconciled. I know that pain, that guilt. I found a letter, I'd continued. After he died, he'd written it but never sent it. He was planning to apologize, to make things right, but he never got the chance. Then he did love you, another parent said. In the end, yes, but it wasn't enough. It's never enough, Jennifer had said quietly. We always want more time, but love doesn't stop because someone dies. It just changes shape. I still have that letter. I keep it in a frame on my bedside table, next to a photo of Christopher at his college graduation. In the photo, he's smiling, his arm around me, both of us genuinely happy. That's the son I choose to remember, not the one who pushed me away, not the one who was ashamed of me, the one who loved me, who knew he'd made mistakes, who was trying to find his way back. The cream dress with the lace sleeves still hangs in my closet. I'll never wear it now. It was meant for a wedding that never happened, for a relationship that died before my son did. But I keep it anyway, a reminder of hope, of what might have been. Sometimes I think about that last conversation, about how I could have said something different, done something different. Maybe if I'd gone to the wedding anyway, Christopher wouldn't have been so upset. Maybe he wouldn't have been drinking. Maybe he'd still be alive. But that way lies madness. I can't change the past. I can only live with it. 2 years after the funeral, I was at the grocery store when I ran into someone I didn't expect to see. Gregory Whitmore. He'd aged badly. His hair was completely gray now, his face lined with stress. He was alone, examining canned soups with the confused expression of someone who'd never shopped for himself before. He saw me, and for a moment, I thought he might turn and walk away. Instead, he approached. Catherine, Gregory. Silence. Then, how have you been? I'm alive, I said simply. How's Gina? His expression crumpled. We're divorced. It happened 6 months ago. After Vanessa died, everything just fell apart. The business went under. We lost the house. Gina blamed me for pushing Vanessa to marry Christopher, for the expensive wedding, for all of it. And maybe she was right. I didn't know what to say to that. I've thought about you, he continued. About calling you. I wanted to. I don't know. Apologize? Explain? Gina was so focused on appearances, on making sure everything was perfect. She pushed Vanessa so hard to have this fantasy wedding, this fantasy life. And Vanessa pushed Christopher. And it all just collapsed. I finished. Yeah. He looked at me. I know we treated you terribly. Gina, especially. But I was complicit. I let her push you to the 3rd row. I let her exclude you. I thought it didn't matter because Christopher was marrying into our family. So in a way, we were replacing you. You can't replace someone's mother. No, you can't. He set down the soup can. I'm sorry, Catherine. For all of it. You deserved better. Christopher deserved better. And maybe if we'd all just been better people, they'd still be alive. I watched him shuffle away, a broken man in a discount grocery store, and I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication. Just a dull sadness for all the ways we'd all failed each other. 5 years after Christopher's death, I attended the high school graduation ceremony where they awarded the scholarship I'd established in his name. The recipient was a young man named Marcus. Wait, no, I can't use that name. The recipient was a young man named Tyler, whose single mother worked 2 jobs to support him. He reminded me so much of Christopher at that age. Bright-eyed, hopeful, determined to make something of himself. Thank you, he'd said when I congratulated him. My mom's been working so hard, and this scholarship means I can go to college without her having to take on more debt. That's wonderful, I'd said. Make sure you tell her you appreciate her. I do. Every day. He'd smiled. She's my hero. I'd had to excuse myself to cry in the bathroom. That boy had what Christopher and I had lost, that uncomplicated love between parent and child. No shame, no resentment, just gratitude and appreciation. I hoped Tyler never lost that. I hoped he never met someone who made him ashamed of where he came from. I hoped he grew up to be the man Christopher was trying to become. I'm 67 now. 5 years have passed since Christopher died, and I can say his name without my chest clenching. I can look at photos of him and smile at the memories instead of drowning in regret. The support group helped. Therapy helped. Time helped. But what helped most was Christopher's letter. That proof that he knew in the end what mattered. That he understood, even if he couldn't act on it, what he'd lost. I still work at the dental office. Though I quit the night cleaning job, my back couldn't take it anymore, and I had enough saved to manage on one income. I have friends now, other parents from the support group, a book club at the library, neighbors I actually talk to instead of just nodding at in the hallway. I have a life that isn't defined by sacrifice or grief, but I still keep that cream dress in my closet, and sometimes, when I'm feeling particularly melancholy, I take it out and hold it. "Don't wear white," Christopher had said, "or you'll ruin everything." I'd obeyed. I'd worn gray to his funeral, black in my heart. But the real ruin had nothing to do with what I wore. It had happened long before, in 1,000 small moments when we chose pride over love, appearance over authenticity, a fantasy future over the imperfect reality of who we really were. The wedding never happened. But in some ways, we all died that day, the people we might have been, the relationships we might have had, the love that got buried under expectation and shame. I wore black to their funeral because that's what you wear when something dies. But I keep the white dress as a reminder of what almost lived, what could have been, if only we'd all been brave enough to choose differently. Last week, I received a package. No return address, just my name and apartment number. Inside was a photo album, the wedding album that had been professionally made before Christopher and Vanessa died. Some well-meaning person at the photography studio must have decided to send it to me, the mother. I'd almost thrown it away unopened. But curiosity got the better of me. The photos were beautiful. Christopher in his tuxedo, Vanessa in her extravagant dress, the cathedral decorated in white and gold, guests laughing and toasting. And there, in 3 photos near the back, was an empty chair. 3rd row, aisle seat, reserved for me. Someone had put a small placard on it. Mother of the groom. I'd been there after all, in absence. A ghost at my son's wedding. I closed the album and put it on my shelf, next to the framed letter and the photo of Christopher's college graduation. Evidence of love, evidence of loss, evidence of the complicated, painful, beautiful mess of being human. My son warned me not to wear white, afraid I'd ruin everything. But everything was already ruined, long before I chose my dress. Ruined by fear and pride and the 1,000 ways we fail each other while trying to love each other. I wore black to their funeral, but I carry white in my heart, still the hope that somewhere, somehow, Christopher knows I forgive him, that I understand, that I love him still, and always will. That's the real dress I wear now. Not cream or gray or black, but the invisible garment of a mother's love, which doesn't end with death or betrayal or disappointment. It just endures. And maybe, in the end, that's enough. Thank you for listening to my story, and thank you for being here.